Well, Razorback fans, it's another Top Tuesday here on the Locked On Razorbacks podcast. So let's talk about the top three newcomers that are going to be on the Razorback football team this season. It's all coming up on today's Locked On Razorbacks podcast.
You are Locked On Razorbacks, your daily podcast on the Arkansas Razorbacks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into the Locked On Razorbacks podcast. I am your host, John Nabors. I am also the host of the John Nabors Show, which you can catch every weekday afternoon on Natty State Sports and nattystatesports.com. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. And we know that these days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions do apply. Hope everybody had a wonderful weekend. I had to take yesterday off, had a lot of stuff going on, which I'm sure a lot of you know about, and probably are waiting with bated breath to hear more about, and that'll come in due time, don't you worry. But, you know, when it comes to Tuesdays, and obviously we're into the slower part of the year, we start to dive into some of things about looking at football, because that's kind of the next big thing. We know basketball is still hot and heavy on a lot of people's minds, but either way, still some interesting things to talk about. And one of the things, though, for the Razorbacks, and just for really any team in general when it comes to college football, you're always going to be talking about the transfer portal, because everybody's taking advantage of it. You win some and you lose some. The portal giveth and the portal taketh away. So this year, Arkansas obviously had to have a lot of needs addressed and obviously a lot of changes. And they lost a lot of players out of the portal, and they were able to gain some of the players out of the portal. And if you look at pretty much every year under Sam Pittman that the portal has been a part of the game itself, you've had some pretty big impact players, ones that have really made a difference. I think, without question, the greatest transfer that Arkansas ever got in was Drew Sanders out of Alabama. That was huge. Landon Jackson happened to be a pretty nice one, too. Dwight McLaughlin wasn't too bad. So they've had definitely some pretty big additions. Even an Andrew Armstrong, I was a really big fan of when he played last year, and I look forward to seeing what he can do again this year in the offense. But some of these may be pretty obvious, but the other ones maybe not so much, because I actually have two defensive players that I'm going to mention. But let's start with the obvious ones. These are not in any particular order, folks, but the obvious one is Taylen Green, the quarterback. He's QB1. If you watched any of spring practice or any of the spring scrimmages, he was QB1. If you were able to check out some of the scrimmages or some of the practices when it wasn't open to the public, but it was open to the media, you saw that, yes, Taylen Green is QB1. And seeing of him on social media, and if you haven't given him a follow, I would suggest it, folks, because he is somebody that truly gives the vibes of being a great leader, a leader that Arkansas has really needed and any team can really use. But it seems like he has the respect of the players, his teammates, but most importantly, the respect of his offensive line, because we know that that's going to be the best friend for any sort of quarterback that could ever be coming in. But just to kind of give a quick background on Taylen Green, in case none of you had really known anything about him and him coming into this year. But, you know, last year he was a redshirt sophomore with Boise State, played 13 games with 12 starts. He completed 57% of his passes, 1,752 yards, 11 touchdowns on the year. He also rushed for 436 yards and 9 touchdowns on 78 carries, which is a whopping 5.6 yards a carry. So just looking at those numbers, yes, the completion percentage is not that great, needs to be higher. But the fact that he was able to get 17 passing touchdowns while also rushing for 436 yards and 9 touchdowns shows the dual threat capability that this kid has. He's 6'6", and he's every bit of 6'6". He's a tall old dude, and he's got a lot going on for him, and he's obviously got a lot in front of him that could really he could be the beneficiary of as well. But one of the things I was really known for, at least last year for Boise State, he had his best game of the season in the Mountain West Conference Championship game, where he even had the offensive MVP honors, where he completed 12 of 15 passes, 226 yards, 2 touchdowns, while also rushing for 90 yards and 2 touchdowns on 8 carries. And led Boise State to their 5th Mountain West Conference Championship. So he had 4 touchdowns in the game, 2 on the ground, 2 through the air. Completion percentage was great, and he did it against UNLV. So we all know that when Petrino came in as the offensive coordinator, you know what the offense is going to be. It's going to be at least decent. It's not going to be bad. It's not going to be you're not going to see Arkansas score only 3 points in a game this year. Ain't going to happen. Like they did last year. So the offense is going to be good. But the quarterback position, as we know, is so vital, so crucial, so important that seeing that Taylen Green is going to be taking over the reins and seeing that Petrino was a huge fan of him and has been a huge fan of him, I really like it. I really think that he's going to be a difference maker, and I think that Arkansas is going to be overall better offense, not only just because of Petrino and all of that, but also because of what Taylen Green will be able to do. Now, the other transfer, newcomer, if you would, for Arkansas that I think is really going to be an impact player is actually the other number 10. Taylen Green's number 10. This is the defensive number 10, and that's Xavion Sorey. Now, Xavion Sorey is the linebacker. He's a redshirt junior, where he played in 11 games last year with 2 starts for the Georgia Bulldogs. He finished the year with 19 total tackles, 1.5 tackles for loss, and a sack, as well as 1 pass breakup with 5 quarterback pressures. He had a team-high 6 tackles, including 5 solo against UAB. He also had a sack for a loss of 2 yards against Auburn. Started at linebacker and racked up 5 solo tackles in the SEC championship game against Alabama. So he's 6'3", 224 pounds. And you probably hear those stats and those numbers. You're like, okay, big whoop. But as I've said many times, if there is a player that is good enough to play at Georgia on the defensive side, good enough to play, good enough to do things like be in games and have to be counted on and be able to start in the SEC title game, which I don't know if you guys remember, that was a pretty important game for Georgia to win, and they didn't. But there's a lot of upside there. And if he's good enough to do that at Georgia, he should be good enough to do that at least at Arkansas. And the fact that he's not going to have anybody else in front of him that's going to be more talented or at least guaranteed to start, he's going to get a lot of playing time. So by default, he's going to be able to have a lot of stats. Now, this is also another thing, too. He's a redshirt junior, so he's been around quite a bit. He's a freshman in 2021 for Georgia. And I feel like if you are somebody like Xavion Sorey, you're an experienced guy, experienced player, and you can step right in at a place like Arkansas and be the guy. The pressure's not going to be too much. I don't think the expectation is too high on Xavion Sorey. I don't think any Razorback fan is looking at it and be like, okay, well, the defense makes or breaks on Xavion Sorey, so you better live up to the hype. He's not an 18-year-old, 19-year-old true freshman. He's a guy that can handle it. And I think that because of the fact that he's going to play so much, that he's kind of the guy that's walking right into a situation to where he will get significant playing time. I think that there's no doubt that the expectation is high for him, obviously, but also high for the defense that's going to be surrounding him, because the linebacker is one of the most important positions on the defense, kind of the captain, kind of the quarterback. And can he fit into that role? I think he will. How good will he be? Will he be a guy that's going to be, among some of the greats in SEC play? I think that's maybe too little far-fetched, but I really look forward to seeing what we can get out of him and the type of expectation he sets for himself, too. And then finally, this one's kind of a one that I won't call it a wild card, but it's one that maybe we haven't talked about enough. And this is also on the defense side of the ball, and it's a secondary player, Danico Slaughter, or Nico Slaughter, if you just want to call him by what most people do. He's the transfer from Tennessee. Now, he is this is his last year as a college player. He has no more eligibility left after this year. And last year, as a senior for Tennessee, he had 32 tackles, 26 solo, including 1 sack, and he played in 10 games on the year. He led all players with a career best 11 tackles against Georgia, started at corner and posted 7 tackles against Missouri, racked up 5 tackles, including a 9-yard sack against UConn, returned to the starting lineup against Kentucky, and finished the game with 3 solo tackles, as well as posted a season-high 4 tackles at Alabama, and saw action in 14 defensive snaps versus South Carolina. Did not play against Florida and UTSA due to injury, but he played 41 snaps at corner and had a pair of tackles against Austin Peay, as well as starting at corner against Virginia, and played in 29 defensive snaps. So that was just a lot of basically his bio of what he did at Tennessee. But I'm telling you right now, here's where I kind of come in with Nico Slaughter. If somebody that played at a high major SEC school, and again, maybe not started every game, but played, he's going to be good enough also to play at Arkansas. He'll be good enough to get into the rotation. But it really got up for me when I saw Nico Slaughter walk into spring practice and, of course, have to work his way up and have to do some things. But to see him take Snacks Johnson's spot. Like, Snacks Johnson has transferred out. He transferred after spring. If there was a surefire guy that I thought was going to be a starter, it was going to be Snacks Johnson. He played last year, did pretty well, and I thought it was going to be the same this year. But later into the spring, Nico Slaughter stepped in, ended up being the guy. So when I watched him play in spring ball, I was like, okay, there must have been something in the spring. It could have been one of two things, basically. Either Snacks Johnson regressed, and by default, Nico Slaughter just happened to be there. Or the more likely scenario, Nico Slaughter just adapted well. He was coached well. He worked really hard. He understood things, and he made plays and elevated his prestige in his game in the spring practices. That's probably the more likely one, and that's the one I'm going to believe. But those are the three players I think are going to be the most impactful newcomers for Arkansas. Taylen Green, Xavion Sori, as well as Nico Slaughter, the transfer from Tennessee. We'll talk a little baseball, too. A little baseball news coming up there here in just a second. But first, I got to tell you about the fine folks of LinkedIn. You know, when you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are just right for the role. And that's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals that you can't find anywhere else. Even those who aren't actively searching for a new job but might be open to a perfect role. In any given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. And they know that small businesses are wearing so many hats and may not have the resources and time to hire anybody. But LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make the process easier. And they even launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even quicker and easier. So post your job for free right now at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply.
You are Locked On Razorbacks, your daily podcast on the Arkansas Razorbacks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, so continuing on with the Locked On Razorbacks podcast. Some news in baseball, which kind of comes hand in hand. We talked a little bit about newcomers and the transfer portal and how it seems to be part of it. But kind of a new thing happening right now with the transfer portal for baseball. At least the news is coming from HogsSports.com. But Arkansas sophomore Jayson Jones has officially entered into the NCAA transfer portal, which is really unfortunate. At least I feel so. He started 18 games in left field and once in right field for the season. Then he started games at first base, third base, and then DH as a freshman. He was the number 8 high school baseball recruit by Baseball America in 2022. But he struggled to stay in the lineup with a career batting average of 195. He played in 43 games during his 2 seasons. He went 14 of 72 with 4 home runs, 3 doubles, and 8 walks. And Jones contributed to both of the Razorbacks' 2 biggest comebacks of the year. So yeah, that was unfortunate. I guess him and Hunter Grimes, are the 2 players that are going to be entering the portal. Which I didn't even realize about Hunter Grimes, that he's seeking his 7th college season at his 4th school. Shoosh. So I hate that though. I hate that for Jayson Jones. I hate that for Arkansas. And, you know, it just goes back to the whole thing that we talked about when, like, offensive philosophies and problems with the offense, problem with the hitting. Again, not every player is going to hit, and pardon the pun, pardon the expression. Like, they're not always going to be as great as they live up to the expectation. And to be the number 8 high school baseball recruit, that's pretty dadgum impressive. Pretty dadgum impressive. You don't get to that point for no reason. So having that high expectation when you're walking in, there's always going to be a level of the mental game that you're going to have to battle through, that you're going to have to go through the gymnastics of everything. Trying to figure out, okay, what do I think about this? Like, how am I going to live up to this? What if I don't? What if I'm not cracking the rotation? What if I'm not starting? What if I'm not as good? What if I'm this? What if I'm that? all this stuff that really starts getting put up and start questioned and everything is one of those deals to where it's just like, man, just go out and play baseball. Just go out and do your best. And it just, didn't work out for him. Now, some people are going to hear those stats I just read out and immediately go, Nate Thompson, you suck. What is this? You're terrible. This is just another thing of Nate Thompson. And, I'm not going to sit here and say that could have been the problem or maybe was the problem, whatever it is. But at the same time, players got to play. Players got to hit. Players got to go up there and they got to do their thing. And, having a batting average of 195, that's just not going to cut it. If we're taking Dave Van Horn at his word, which I don't understand why we wouldn't, we also know that Arkansas is going to be trying to change that offensive philosophy and talking about athletes, getting big-time athletes, guys to maybe go back to the small ball era, stealing bases, bunting, things like that. Well, Jayson Jones may just not have been built for something like that. Maybe he wasn't what they were looking for, and maybe he wanted to go elsewhere to kind of be into a role or be into a system that was better suited for him. Or maybe he was mutually asked, like, hey, you're probably not going to have a spot on this team next year. It might be best for you to look elsewhere. I mean, there's a dozen different explanations that can happen from it. But all I'm asking and all I'm saying is that you can't just always assume it's the problem that seems to exist no matter what. You can't just automatically be like, well, here's the issue right here. This is the main problem, and it's this as you point to it. Like, that's not the case. There's a lot more that goes into it and a lot more that goes on. So I wish him nothing but the best of luck. Like, I really thought that he would be great at Arkansas. I was really excited to see him grow and see him develop as time went on. But again, sometimes it's just like that. Sometimes it'd be like that. And I'm sure he's not going to be, him and Grimes are not going to be the only guys transferring out of Arkansas. And we know players are going to be transferring in. And baseball is always the most complicated one because of the fact that you only have 11.7 scholarships. It's always a matter of, not every player is going to have the same opportunities. Not every player is going to have the same, schooling and all that. But even so with the NIL, not every player is going to have the same NIL. I mean, how many players are actually going to have NIL, if any? That's kind of the biggest question mark for it all. But either way, it's going to be fascinating to see where he ends up. Wish him nothing but the best of luck, and hopefully it truly does work out for him. We'll talk about some former Razorback basketball news here in just a second. But, folks, summertime means baseball, the NBA Finals, which just concluded, as we'll talk about, and a lot more. So you can bet it all on FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any $5 winning bet. That's $200, and you can start betting on everything. From everything with baseball, Major League Baseball, that's going to be going on. It's kind of sad that now that the NBA is over. But there's going to be plenty of that going on right now, and even some college baseball, too. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and add a big win to your summer bucket list. It's FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook.
You are Locked On Razorbacks, your daily podcast on the Arkansas Razorbacks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, so final segment here on the Locked On Razorbacks podcast. I just wanted to give a big congratulations to Jordan Walsh, the former Razorback, former 5-star McDonald's All-American, a player that was on the Razorback basketball team 2 seasons ago and was crucial, pivotal, in the best game that Arkansas had that season when beating Kansas to advance to the Sweet 16. Because he had just been a part of the Boston Celtics, my favorite team in the NBA, if I was to choose one. They have won an NBA Finals. It's crazy. I got into an argument about some with somebody like this because they were actually rooting for the Mavericks. And they were just like, the Celtics have won so many. I was like, okay, they've won one since 1983 or whatever it is. So, the Mavericks have won 2 since then. So I don't want to hear that crap. But regardless, I'm glad that he went to a good franchise. I'm glad he went to the Celtics, and I'm glad that he was able to get a little bit of playing time and even get checking into the NBA Finals, Game 5, as the Celtics were able to win that game. Now, again, it's awesome to see him, have a ring on his finger for an NBA title, and who knows the type of player he'll become. There's a lot of stuff that has to go down for it and everything. But I just try to put that into my own mind and into my own perspective. I could not imagine I could not imagine being a player like Jordan Walsh, where last season, over a year ago, little over a year ago, you were playing college basketball in the NCAA tournament against Kansas. And then the year before that, you were playing high school basketball as a 17-year-old, 18-year-old kid. Think about that jump. Think about how crazy that is. Like, put yourself in your shoes there. This is a kid that went from being, oh, you're a 5-star player. Oh, you committed to Arkansas. Great. And then in 2 years, 2 seasons, bam, NBA title, NBA championship ring, checking into the NBA Finals as a player for the team that's about to win. Like, that's just amazing. Like, I couldn't imagine that feeling, knowing the journey that they had been on up until that point, and then finally, having that. It's just like, it moves so fast. He's 20 years old. He just turned 20 back in March. Just turned 20. And now he's got an NBA title ring, and nobody will ever be able to take that away from him in his first year. How cool is that? So I love it. I love it for Jordan Walsh. Always enjoyed watching Jordan Walsh. Always thought that he was maybe a much better player than a lot of people gave him credit for, but he really developed, and it's good to see him. It's not like he plays a significant amount of minutes, but it was good to see him get picked up by them and for him to be on that team and he only averaged 1.7 points a game, 2.2 rebounds, 0.6 assists. Shot 40%, though. So, there's that to look at. But this year, he's only played 9 games in regular season and 3 games in the postseason. But still, he's got the ring, and you can't take that away from him. Nobody can take that away from him. Appreciate everybody listening in to Locked On Razorbacks podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or on Google Play. You can also get after me on Twitter at John Nabors Show for any questions, comments, concerns that you may have. We'll keep it going from there. Same podcast time, same podcast channel tomorrow afternoon. Have a great day, everybody. We'll see you.